Alrighty, we are live. Hello, everyone out in the Outlook world and on the Facebook world. My name is Jessie Littlejohn, and I am the social media producer for the Presbyterian Outlook. We are back this month with another Facebook Live conversation, and I am joined by a pretty stellar group of colleagues in ministry that I am very excited to share a space with. With me, depending on where you are on your screen, but on my screen in the top corner is the Dr. Sarah Leer, who is the transitional youth and young adult developer with the Presbytery of Arkansas. She also has her own consulting business. Make sure to look her up online, Dr. Sarah Leer. We also have the Reverend Maggie Alsup, who is the chaplain at Lyon College, as well as being, pastor extraordinaire in the world. And we also have excuse me, there's a helicopter flying over my apartment right now, so just give me 1 second. We also have the Reverend Katrina. Oh my gosh, I messed it. I already forgot. Katrina, say it out loud.
Pekich-Bundy, you're good.
Bundy. We also have the Reverend Katrina Pekich-Bundy, who is the new director, not interim anymore, director as of 60 minutes ago of spiritual life at Alma College, as well as the pastor of First Presbyterian Church in Alma, Michigan. So thank you, all four of you, for being here and for being in this space with me. This afternoon, we are going to take some time to talk about loneliness, which maybe is not super exciting for you, but this is the June issue of Presbyterian Outlook. This is kind of where we have focused a lot of our ministry and attention on. And in this issue, I'm going to post the link in our chat for those of you who are looking online. So this will show up as a comment. Katrina wrote an article for us about how students are struggling and connecting in 2025. They all offer a unique perspective in this space of being connected with youth and young adults and what that looks like, what the loneliness epidemic looks like in 2025 amongst youth and young adults. And so I'm excited that all of you were willing to come alongside of me and engage in this conversation. We have a lot of talk in the church about youth and young adults and how we need youth and young adults to be a part of the church. And then we're not always willing to meet youth and young adults where they're at and really get to understand and learn about them. And so I want to just kind of dive in a little bit on the article as well as your experiences. And so Katrina, in your article, you mentioned at Alma College, it was sort of that quintessential college experience that I think all of us kind of had, or many of us have, 4 years on campus, mandatory in-person housing, that built-in community of people right next door. You had somebody there all the time. And then you transitioned to seminary, and it was a totally different vibe. So I wonder how, as you were doing this article, and Sarah and Maggie as well, as you're in your ministry, how, if any experiences of loneliness in your life affect the way that you minister to youth and young adults in your current setting. Katrina, I'll let you go first, and then Maggie and Sarah, just jump in when you're ready.
Thanks. Yeah, I think, I graduated in the early aughts, so my experience is different than college now, as it should be. But I think that some of these topics that we're talking about, like loneliness, it's it's universal human experience at some point in our lives. And I found that I was at a residential campus at Alma, and I just had neighbors all around that I could knock on their door and say, hey, let's go hang out. And even though I was on campus for seminary, it was a little bit different. And that was sort of my first little step into the real world and going, oh, this is going to be different. And so as I was researching for this article and talking to people, I, for one thing, had great empathy because I've had my own periods of loneliness that have looked different. But for me, that was probably the college age era was probably when I was least lonely. So to see that is now a challenge for college age students concerns me. And I'm interested to hear what Sarah and Maggie have to say as well.
Maggie, do you want to go ahead?
I was going to let you go ahead because you're like at the top of my screen, but yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that, Katrina, and I appreciate in your article, like how you made that distinction, because you and I are probably around the same age. And so it really was, seminary for me was a really fruitful time of making connections, but on a smaller scale than college was. Actually, for me, going to college far away from where I grew up was originally like a really lonely time that first year. And so I have a lot of empathy especially for people that are in that brand new setting. It took me a while to kind of find my people, and I didn't have a supercomputer in my pocket like teenagers and young adults do now. So it was a very different experience on how to find folks. But when you were talking, I was thinking, for me, it's about building community. And when I went to my first job, which was an internship in Louisville, I had a little bit of built-in community with that group, but it was really hard moving to a new place. And that's what I often talk with teenagers and young adults about, is finding your community. That's where it was important in my experience, was finding your community when you maybe have that first job, because you do want people to hang out with who are not like your boss or the person next door. You do want to have good boundaries about that stuff. And that took me a while to learn, right? Like, and having those first experiences of, where do you meet folks? Like, what is it, an interest group? Is it something you're passionate about? And it makes a huge difference, especially moving to a new city, or like going out on your own, having your first apartment, stuff like that. It's not built in. You don't necessarily know your neighbors. And like you said, it's very different now, right?
Yeah, I think for me, Sarah also went a little further away from home. Well, not too far. There was a line. There was a radius my mom drew on a map, a circle that was too close, and then a circle that was too far. And we go between the two, because that means we could get to each other in a day if need be, which was like excellent advice. At the time, I was very mad though, because I was like, but what if I want to go to school inside the circle? And she was like, so unless you have a full ride, then we can renegotiate things, So that was a little bit of, I was very much a homebody, like as a kid, and very much my life revolved around my family. And like, I have a big, loud, crazy family. And so to move and to not move anywhere near family was shocking, to say the least, for young Maggie. And I think my first 3 weeks at college, I called my home landline, which most kids don't have these days either, from the phone in the dorm room, aging ourselves there. But and my mom finally was like, we said you could call anytime. We didn't mean like we needed like daily updates from you. Like, we love you and we love hearing about your experiences, but like, it's kind of a lot. And so it was one of those, like, I had my roommate as a built-in, somewhat support system. We were the same major. And so we were able to connect on like classwork and stuff, which was great. I had suite mates, which were awesome. One was also a biology major like we were, so that was great to have her as well. The other one was a theater person, so that opened our campus connections to a whole different field of students that we might not interact with. But yeah, just kind of branching away from the phone and then to the built-in roommate that's there, and us braving we're going to go to this social function together, and slowly finding that community together and like for each other worked really well. Like, it's still, they don't have landlines and phones in their dorms anymore because they're all in their pockets, and portable, but it's still that kind of concept. The loneliness and the connection still exist in college today. It's just the loneliness hits differently than it did for us, but there's still that same communal aspect of like finding your people, finding common interests, finding things that maybe push you a little bit in your social groups, to get you out there, and away from, being homesick or lonely or, relying heavily on your roommate to carry the social impact and load for you.
Yeah, that was huge for me is finding stuff that I'd never tried before. I was telling a group of college students about this summer actually that I tried field hockey. And I didn't know, I'm from Arkansas. I didn't know how to play field hockey, but because I went to a school where our field hockey team was excellent and won national championships, the people that won state championships from Maryland and New Jersey and places, that actually have field hockey, were on the club team with me, and then were horrified that I didn't know the rules. I was like, I have a stick. Where do I go? So for me, it was really trying to push myself, like you said, Maggie, to try to find new things. And then I ended up basically living in the theater department, and that was super helpful because immediately found more folks that way. But you're with each other all the time when you do something like that, when you do the arts and you're at rehearsal all the time. So there are some places that will just take all of your time. And then that was another learning is, how do I balance not just doing this one thing, even though they're awesome people that help me try new things in a new place.
Yeah, I love this. And I love how you all had unique experiences, but similar experiences. And I'm interested, and Katrina, your article lifted this up a little bit. I'm interested sort of where we are today, post-pandemic, but still feeling the effects of pandemic culture life, and the way that, I mean, I guess on some level, some of your students were in the midst of high school and middle school during those pandemic years, and so we're feeling the effects of that still, and how that affected their social development, how that affected their social skills. That was listed up in the article as well. So I guess between pandemic life and the aftermath of that, as well as a greater awareness of our own neurodiversities and divergencies, and how we all navigate the world in our own unique ways, beyond just, oh, I'm an introvert, or I'm shy, or I'm an extrovert, and I'm the life of the party. We all navigate and experience the world in different ways that affect how we function. And then also just, we all have a greater awareness of, and this was lifted up as well, of anxiety and depression and how those feed one another. And social anxiety is a very real thing. And you combine that with neurodiversity, you combine that with limited understanding of social skills, whether from the pandemic or not, you have all of those things combined. And so it's kind of one of those, is this the ultimate thing that is keeping some of our youth and young adults from really being able to go out there and sort of break through this loneliness? And so I'm curious how you all are navigating those spaces, the neurodiversity, the anxiety, the depression, the how do I teach young adults and youth, and even in my life, how do I teach my 6-year-old who grew up predominantly during the pandemic years how to interact with kids, and he has neurodiversities and anxiety at the same time. And he's 6, and you're dealing with young adults. So how do you all navigate those spaces, especially as they also are navigating their spiritual life and identity in the midst of all of that? Whoever wants to go can go.
That was a big one. I like how
that was good.
we just dropped that and okay, answer.
My bad.
That was good.
I mean, I'll just offer this. I had the opportunity to be with a group of young adults at Montreat Youth Conference. They're the NYC alum, is what that group is called, for weeks 1 and 2. And I learned a lot from those groups. And part of what I learned from them is that we had the opportunity to kind of figure out our own schedule with how that was set up. And I, chatted with them. What do they need? What do they want for the week? And figuring out some goals on how I could facilitate that. And I think that's that to me is a model that's helpful with teenagers as well, right? I mean, obviously in some places it's different when it's young adults, because sometimes they have control of their own schedules that the teenagers don't often. But I'm just seeing the neurodivergence and places where people need to step away, or they need to, if they're overstimulated, designating that kind of space or that kind of time in their schedule. Whenever I'm working with youth and young adults, it is just offering that up front and just being really clear, especially when you have youth and young adults with neurodivergence, right? That clarity can be super, super helpful and be a game changer. Of you let me know when you're overstimulated, right? Like, here are the parameters. Here's what we can do. Here's what probably going to work. Here's what maybe won't work so well. But if we need to amend our schedule, we can do that, because at least in these faith spaces, it's not school, right? I'm not your teacher. I'm a trusted adult in this space. And so when we're working with youth in the presbytery or something like that, we can amend, right? Like, we can be flexible. And often, I don't know about y'all, but I will find those teenagers exhale, or those young adults exhale, because schedules are important. And yet we need to offer that space for them to get away. And especially if we're talking about spiritual practices, if we're talking about like what it means to, what is life-giving to you? Is it being in nature? Is it reading? Is it having like a discussion with just a small group? We need to be able to offer those spaces and listen to what people really need. And I think often our teenagers and young adults get ignored on what I don't think often people ask what they need.
I want to second. Sorry, go ahead.
No,
Maggie.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I want to second what you said, because I think you're absolutely right. That I think all people should be asked, what do you need right now?
Right.
And we often listen to the older adults, but we don't always listen to the young adults and the youth. And I also have a neurodivergent child, and who has taught me so much about the world. And while I mentioned in my article that, I mean, we all know that what social media can do if we scroll for too long, and what it does to our brains and being online. But in a lot of ways, being online, some of those social media connections have made socializing more accessible for a lot of people. So I think we can't say, don't scroll, don't connect, don't do, it's finding what we need in a healthy way.
Yeah, I will say the same thing. Like, it's very, a lot of the times when I ask students, what do you need? They're kind of caught off guard and a little like shocked that I would turn the question around on them instead of telling them like, this is what we're going to do. And so remembering to ask them just up front, like, do we need to make friends? Are we sure staying in our room is okay? Like, you sound like you might need some socialization. What does that look like? Right. And a lot of times they want that, but they're not sure how to ask for that. And I think that's a big space. If you, as the leader or the, designated adult, I guess, because you're in charge in that situation, helping them to know that it's okay to ask the question of like, hey, I think I might need to socialize with some people, or I might need to find some people I can hang out with that we can process things, really does help a lot. And creating spaces that allow them to be themselves, especially within the neurodivergent world, but also still in community. So one of the big things we do is our esports team is very big. And they have a lot of students, but what they do is they occasionally throughout the semester host game nights, and they will play Fortnite together. Okay. They will set up 28 computers in one room, and they will provide the pizza and the soda, and you bring whatever you bring your own computer if you want to play, or there's those computers provided for you. And so they're in a space and with people. And so they know they can interact and engage over the game that they're all playing together, but they also have that interaction if they choose to be outside of the screen world for a little bit and engage one-on-one in a personal space with one another. And so I think you just got to kind of find those ways to to allow that. Now, carrying 28 computers around is not really going to be feasible for a lot of people and communities, but finding that space to offer it up and how that might work for your people is really the key. And getting creative with it. Like, I never would have thought people would love to come sit in a room and play video games when you're playing the same game online. Never would have thought that's not my cup of tea. So I would not have thought other people loved it, but there's several students that find that community very helpful for them. So
yeah, I mean, just a couple of things, but Maggie, I was just thinking, like, during the pandemic and being a youth worker, how we built, all kinds of stuff, but we built gingerbread houses on Zoom together, and it's like those things that we did that I now look at, I'm like, I cannot believe we did that with 15 people or whatever it was. But it's a similar thing, right? Like, you're in community, but you might be doing the same thing, right? And now we can be together. But also we can give spaces. There's something that we do in the presbytery called a silent disco. And we used to have dances that were super, super loud. And now we have the silent disco through our friends at Ferncliff, thankfully. And we're able to dance together and have the headphones. And then for, like, our neurodivergent folks in the room, they can take it off. And yes, there are people singing out loud. Generally, it's like me and Maggie, but like, they can take it off and they can go in a different space and it's not super loud. And that switch is still popular. It's still fun. We still have a dance, but people who don't want to do it can go in a different space. And they're still able to be together, and yet they can opt out. And I was also going to say, Katrina, I love, like, your conversation about healthy boundaries with online spaces, because I talk with folks about that all the time, especially people that are like, they just need to get rid of the phone. But then there's the stats of LGBTQIA plus, like, youth, especially trans and non-binary youth, who are finding online community as affirming and life-giving. And so I just wanted to, like, thank you for saying that too, because I talk about that all the time.
yeah, and so I think back to when Twitter, X, whatever we're calling the online platform these days, and whatever is up to these days. When it first started, I remember my mom loved it. Like, she loved blogging when blogs became a thing. Like, that woman would blog about anything. She's just, but one of the things she loved to do at church was to sit there and basically, like, live tweet the sermon and, like, her thoughts on the message that the pastor was preaching from the pulpit, and, like, was it connecting with what was happening in her world and the world around her. And he got snarky one day and called her out from the pulpit about, like, being distracted, right, and being on these phones. And she was like, after the service, was like, I just want you to know this is what I'm doing. She, like, just pulls it up and she's like, here are the receipts of me. I am listening. Here are my viewpoints on what you said. I disagreed with this one, and this one, because here's my take on it. Right. And so, like, you have to have that space where, like, online's not always a bad thing. And there is a lot of downside and negativity, but, like, there's a lot of good and value that can come from it. And you might have that little old lady that looks like she's just on her phone all day, not paying attention from the pulpit, but in reality, she's figuring out how to process for her what the message is to the congregation and how that applies to her. And so, like, even in worship spaces, having that ability for people to worship how they need to worship and process how they need to process is really an important piece that I think the church sometimes gets a little too, here are the worship rules and here we have to do things. And so if you can allow that back pew sitting Presbyterian to pull out the phone during the sermon, maybe you'll get some good counterpoints, to thinking for next week. So yeah, we have to figure out how to do that in a healthy way, I think, for congregations and communities.
I think there's an ableist assumption that if you are not staring at someone when they're talking and, making noise or, agreement or nodding your head, that you're not paying attention. But yeah, there are so many ways of listening that I love that your mom does that. Like, I wish people did that in my congregation, because I would totally follow them and be like, what did they say about this?
Yeah.
I think
yeah, no, right.
They're engaged, right, in a different way, but just not in the normal way.
So that I think that's a really great point that you bring up about the ableist sort of assumption of how we navigate church spaces. And I think we would be remiss not to talk about, this idea that the number one thing that I think any church encounters, any ministry, is like, we need more kids and youth. We need more families with young adults. We want our youth that go off to college to come back and be a part of this community. And those are all wonderful things to want and to need. And yes, we want to continue to cultivate spiritual formation amongst our youth and young adults, so that we can have this body that continues in a really healthy way. And at the same time, our traditional worship spaces lending themselves to the needs of young adults, to youth, to anybody really, because we do function in that lane of, this is how it's supposed to be, this is how you're supposed to function, this is what your expectations are. We would love for you to come, but please assimilate to how our culture is. And are we asking, as leadership, as pastors, as elders, that question that you all are asking your youth: what do you need? Are we asking those things, or are we just making assumptions? And so for me, I guess the question that I have for you is, what do we need to do differently to create more expansive spaces? That, because and hold that in your head, hold that question, because I also find that loneliness can be that isolation experience of, I'm stuck in my dorm room, or I'm trapped in this space, or I don't want to go outside my house. But loneliness can also be walking into that church space that was formerly triggering, and I don't know how to navigate that. Loneliness can be, I'm walking into church for the first time, and I don't know anything about how things are run, and nobody's helping me, and I feel completely lost. And loneliness can also be, I want to be here so badly, but I don't know what I offer to this congregation. And so even in community, you can still feel that isolation and that loneliness. And so again, like, how do we create spaces, expansive spaces, to do this thing that we call church, whether it's on campus or in our pews? How do we do that differently to make it more expansive? The $1 million question that nobody has figured out how to answer.
I mean, I just, there's so many answers that are in my head, Jesse. I mean, I think one thing that I love to ask this question and hear what other people are doing, honestly, because I feel like I'm, always learning from other people. But one is taking it exactly from what you said about assimilation and inclusion, that we use inclusion a lot. We use that term, but examining it more as belonging. And this is I've had several opportunities to talk with people about this in workshops and hear what that means. So what does it mean to really look at our spaces and as our culture, our faith community culture, and expand it or change it or amend it based on the gifts that people bring, and who they are as people? And that also includes taking that anti-ableist lens, right? Is there something that somebody brings because of their body, because of what they need in that space, that we aren't currently offering? And not just physical space. Often people talk about anti-ableism with accommodations that way, but it may be our bulletins, right? Or it has we have these expectations that people are going to, I say we in Peace USA world, people are going to look at things a certain way. But it may just be when folks show up, not overwhelming them with the bombarding, oh my gosh, you should serve on fellowship committee, but really just say, hey, you seem like, I haven't seen you before, or maybe it's, your first time here, second time. What do you do in town? Are you visiting? Do you what's, just getting to know folks. I know it sounds super simple, but I was talking with students at at Lyon College where Maggie serves. And one of the questions that came up, and Maggie, I know you remember this conversation, but I asked them how many times they give like a faith community a chance, right? When they walk into a new space. And they were like, 2. Because it really is giving people an opportunity to get to know you and say, this is what we do in this community, and we would love for you to, you know, be a part of it. And then, who are you? What are you interested in? Why are you here? You know, what is something exciting going on in your life? And then thinking, you know, how can our community grow and change because you're here?
And to be very patient, like, which is hilarious that I'm the one saying that, y'all. Like, that is not a gift of the Spirit that I have. I always have to work on it. And then I don't want to ask for it because I know the challenge that I will get in having to work on my own patience. But like, there's just since the pandemic, and I refer to my lovely children as feral cats. I don't know if this is how you all feel with young adults and children these days. But they're feral cats, right? Like they want to have that relationship. They know that there might be some food or something involved, right? That's going to feed them in some way. But they're very shy, standoffish. They don't really know how to socialize in public. They're not real sure what to do with humans, right? So they might come out for a minute and they might go to one event and they might be like, ooh, that was a lot. And then retreat back and be gone for the whole fall semester, right? And then you'll see them around midterms of the spring semester all of a sudden, and then they are there every week. But then they'll retreat again in the next fall, and then until they build that relationship and that trust. And so it really is, I think, navigating the feral cats, right? Like making that space available, making yourself available to, like, this is who we are. This is how we worship. This is how we gather. Is this what you need? Is it not what you need? If it's not, what do you need? And showing your ability to be patient and adaptable to that, and figuring out like, oh, that worked horribly. We are not going to do that again. And like, or that actually worked well. Never would have thought that. And kind of giving that space for you to, as the leader, to be creative, but also patient enough to work out the creative process to see what's going to stick. And what's going to be helpful to students. But definitely be patient, because you're going to get them to come to you in certain seasons of their life, in college life and also post-college life, that they're really going to lean on someone like you as a spiritual leader, or just as someone they know they can trust. And then they're going to retreat away for a little bit. And then they'll come back all of a sudden and you'll be like, oh, what was happening? And so just to have that space to let them figure themselves out as well. But also know, like, to model for them that it's okay to change and adapt and ask the questions. And if that's for the larger body, something that works, then we're going to try it, because you might not be the only one who's needing that kind of resource and time together to process life. So
that's a good point.
I feel like we were all a little bit feral cat when we came out into the world again. It's just, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I say it's for the students, but I really think it's all of humanity. We're all just feral cats emerging from the alleyway going, what is happening?
But I think for young adults and youth, I mean, they missed a very important developmental phase, right? So
yeah,
for older adults, that it was like, we just like didn't use a skill for a while. They needed to be, out and about in the world to develop that skill. So I love what you're saying. Be flexible and be patient. I was thinking, be intentional, because Jesse, just like you said, you can be in a room full of people and feel just so lonely and isolated, but to intentionally say, okay, these people are going to greet anyone and not bombard them, but also like, but also show genuine interest, and not just assume somebody else is going to greet them and best of luck. I think that's important. I also, for me, when I create worship services, not all the time, but I try to have creative worship that doesn't always necessarily look like a sermon, and but more interactive stuff, especially because I think it's kind of like it's like the esports, right? Like we're all in the same room, but we're all doing it differently, maybe. But we're still engaged, and we can talk if we want to, or we can do this prayer station silently. And, so I try to do a little bit of that. But I think in general, church has to look different than it has if we're going to keep going.
Yeah.
I'll say one of the things I think about in terms of like church dynamics and congregations is, you have my mother who tweets, but you have my father who's a social butterfly and very nosy man. Like he really, yeah. But one of the things I love about him is if he's like, who is that person? Like, who do we know that person? Like he has no problem on Sunday morning going up and being like, hi, my name is John. I'm been a member here for, I don't know, let's tell the whole life story, right? And then he's like, and who are you? And like, how did you find us? And like, just like the kid with 20 questions. So like, that's how my dad, that's how he is at church, right? Like that is who he is. And so I think the curiosity aspect of him, maybe it is a little bit nosy, but that curiosity of like, who are you? Because like I see you standing out in our community because I've never seen you in our community before, but doing it in a way that is very relational and kind-hearted. And I mean, he's just, everyone's like, adopted dad and grandpa. Like he's just a sweet little old man that's just, wants to have coffee with you and learn your whole life story. But there needs to be that kind of level of curiosity, I think, when we have people enter our worshiping communities, that not the, oh, who are you? We've never seen you here before, but that curious, like, oh, who are you? And like, how did you learn about us? Like, why did you want to come worship here on this day? Like, what was this day about that brought you here? Right. And maybe not bombard them with 20 questions, but that introduction piece really is a very vital part of a welcome in a community. And so how can you pinpoint those people who are going to be good in your community at having those conversations, or noticing those on the maybe outskirts of your community, and how can they draw them in further if needed and desired to do so?
Yeah. I also think like your dad and my dad are so similar. That's a lie for another time. But yeah. I also think like, something that sometimes escapes folks, especially in congregations, I find is like knowing who you are, and knowing like when folks show up at your door, and if they're new and maybe they just moved to your community or they're visiting, to be able to say like, this is stuff that we're excited about. This is stuff that we're passionate about. And, in the non-bombardment, be like, we would love to have you join us. Oh, you just moved to town. You probably need to unpack your boxes first. Well, I don't know if you heard, but this place across town has really great lunch. And if you call ahead, that's the tip and trick, right? Like, it's just learning about somebody and being that Ted Lasso curious, not judgmental thing, and asking those questions, and then being willing to back off, right? And say like, this is who we are. We're here. We would love for you to come and hang out with us. We have lunch every third, Tuesday or whatever. If you have a chance to come and join us, it's really a great chance to meet some new people. But ask those questions, right? And then your dad is that second layer. My dad is to ask the other 20 to 40 questions about what they're doing.
Yeah, the college at one point did like, gosh, it's been a while back, but it was when like the colors were big. I don't know, like the red, green, yellow color scheme of like, the red is the very much introverted, like, don't touch me, don't talk to me, like, don't make eye contact. The green's like, sure, hug me, hang out with me, we'll be best friends. And the yellow's like the somewhere in the middle, like, I might give you some time depending on how I'm feeling. And they had us do that as a staff, right? So that we would know when we walked by each other's doors, like depending on the color, like how to approach the situation. And while that is a little ridiculous, sometimes there are some things that are valuable from that I don't think the church should color coordinate itself, but like to have some sort of system for your church to know that, right? Like who are going to be your frontline greeters, welcomers, like inclusioners that are going to be great to start those conversations? Who's going to be that next round to like draw them in deeper and figure out, really, are we meeting each other's needs? And how can we figure out how to make worship better for all of us and inclusive for all of us, you know, and then have, so to kind of have layers and elements of that. And you're going to know in your congregation and community, hopefully, who that, like, ooh, they do not need to be over here in this group. This person needs to be in this group, right? And every church has those people that wants to be plugged in, but doesn't know how. And so being able to give people kind of that option and that opportunity to use their social skills or use whatever skills they have to build up that community can really be life-giving, both for them, but also the congregation.
I was going to end with Ted Lasso, but Sarah, you went ahead and already took care of that for me. So this is such a rich conversation. I still have questions on my list, but we're like 40 minutes in, and normally these are 20 minutes long, but I don't want to cut us off. Terry McDowell, if you are watching this, we should have turned this into a webinar because that's how good this material is. So keep your email boxes open because we might be contacting you again to have a greater conversation. But I want to thank all three of you for being here. I want to thank you for your continued contributions to the Presbyterian Outlook and the way that you all are doing good and faithful ministry where you are at, both in your settings in Michigan and Arkansas, at Lyon College. I'm sorry, Maggie, I actually don't know where Lyon College is. So
we're actually in Arkansas. Fun fact. Sarah and I are on opposite ends of the state. We're like little dots that go all the way across.
So on either end of Arkansas, you're both, bookending really good ministry. Katrina, congratulations on your new position. I'm so thankful for the three of you and the way that you continue to be a witness in the world. For those of you who are watching, I hope that you come back to this. I hope you watch it again. I hope you take notes so that you can continue to be curious. You can continue to ask questions and continue to create expansive spaces so that we can be an ever-growing community, and that for one person, for even just one moment, they feel a little less lonely in this world, where right now we need connection and we need one another to feel the love of Christ and to know that we are not alone. So all three of you, thank you. Outlook World, we will be back again with another Outlook Facebook Live soon, and we will talk to you all later. Bye all.